met, um, the leaders met, there wasn't really much progress in ASEAN. Yes, we had an organization. Yes, we used to meet and talk, but beyond exchanging views and cooperating on issues, there was really no, you couldn't point your finger to say that this is one practical topic or issue that the ASEAN countries have together um, embarked upon that will affect the lives of the people in the region. But this is, to take this view would be looking at it through the eyes of the media, because they only want to know what did the meeting come up with, what have you done, and they don't realize sometimes that in international organizations, including the United Nations, there's a progression of events. The pace is slow, but it is still, the pace is steady. In ASEAN, we got to understand the background, as you asked me why it was set up. The background was there was confrontation between Malaysia and India, Malaysia and Indonesia in 60, up to 65, started around 65, yes. And that was the time when the two neighbors, India and Malaysia, sorry, Indonesia and Malaysia, there was even military incursions from Indonesia. It was quite a serious matter for us. We were had just become independent in 1957. We were barely, say, about 9 years old or something like that. And to be faced with this issue of having problems with a neighbor who refused to accept the fact that ASEAN was now going to incorporate, Malaysia was going to incorporate Singapore, Borneo, and Sarawak as part of its new members. Singapore was under the direct rule of the Colonial Office in London, and Sabah and Sarawak were also under the British colonies. So there was a move to have these three entities join Malaysia, join Malaya at that time, so that we could form a bigger entity called Malaysia, which would incorporate Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak. Sorry. And this move was opposed by Indonesia under President Sukarno. So anyway, it was not a pleasant time for us, but all the same, even though there was tension between the two countries, we still kept our lines of diplomacy open between Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur. Talks were going on how to end it. And with the foresight and the hard work put in by the two sides, Malaysia and Indonesia, they agreed after Indonesia had a new president, President Suharto. They agreed that that the two countries should put aside now what had happened in the past, and we look ahead. And the best way to go together was to have this regional organization. which they call the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN then was signed in 67 with confrontation in 65. Within 2 years, we established the framework agreement and then signed the agreement for the establishment of ASEAN. If you look at the original document, it is a very simple document, very few pages, and all it talks about is, the need for the countries to establish friendly cooperation, friendly ties, have peace and stability, concentrate on education, get to know each other better, and create all this awareness that we are now all part of the same group. And, this ASEAN agreement, you can say that it was an important document, but it was not signed by the leaders. It was signed by the foreign ministers. And of course, the leaders are always briefed, and their concurrence is obtained. But that shows you how gently the leaders wanted to move. They were not sure. They knew that this is the way to go, and it's best that we move slowly. So that agreement talked nothing about the setting up of a national secretariat or a regional secretariat for ASEAN. And it was all the work for putting the region association on its feet, come up with programs and activities, was left to the national secretariats in each country. So there would be a national secretariat of ASEAN in Thailand, similarly in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and Singapore and the Philippines. There was only 5 countries at that time. So, and also noticeable was that during this time, there was not only an established secretariat, a central secretariat, but the leaders did not meet for 10 years. There was no summit. The leaders were meeting, the foreign ministers meeting, officials used to prepare for meetings. And we used to come up with some simple programs of activities. We used to get help from the UNDP and other organizations and guidance on how we should proceed. And of course, getting the necessary resources from UNDP and other international organizations who were supporting us at the time. And slowly, after 10 years only, 76, was there a secretariat established in Jakarta. And the head of the secretariat was called the Secretary General of the ASEAN, of the National Secretariat. The Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat. He was not Secretary General of ASEAN. He was Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat. And most of the work was still being done at the National Secretariat level. Since I was Director General of the National Secretariat in ASEAN, and I probably was the last of the DGs before the new structure was agreed. And I knew exactly, and all my colleagues also knew very well, that the old structure was creaking and that it was not productive and nothing was coming out of it. Most of the work was being done by the national secretariats. We would prepare the agenda, we would prepare the notes, we would prepare the reports, and even during the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting, most of the documentations was being done at the national ASEAN secretariats. And of course, it was done on a rotational basis because the chairmanship of ASEAN is assumed is rotated alphabetically. And so for 1 year, we would be very busy doing all that work. And it was interesting that one of our leaders in the think tanks, Nordin Sopi, he said, we really need to have a proper Secretary General of ASEAN because in this present setup, nothing seems to be moving. And the Secretary General of the ASEAN Secretariat, he's neither a general nor a secretary, not even a postman. You know, he just sits there. Most of the work is done for him at the National Secretariat. But, you know, we plodded along. And 1970, from 1976 to 1992, we carried on with this idea, or not only idea, but this structure, old structure under the old setup. And when I joined, when I had become Director General of ASEAN, there were a few others like me also who had different ideas about how we should go about doing our work. And we proposed that there should be a Secretary General of ASEAN. He should be of ministerial rank. He should be given, instead of a 2-year term of office, a good 5-year term, renewable, maybe. And there were other proposals that were made. Now, if 1965, if the background was the confrontation with Indonesia, 1992 was a different and international environment. The Cold War had ended, and now our relations, we would open up the relations with our friends from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. And of course, they also, after the Cold War, made overtures that they wanted to join ASEAN. And so 1995, Vietnam became a member. 1995, yes. 1997, Laos and Myanmar. And then Cambodia, there was a civil war between the two prime ministers. And just about a few days before they were supposed to meet at the opening ceremony. And because of this civil strife that they had, it was postponed. And it took Cambodia about 2 years after that to become a member. So this is roughly the background as to how we came to set up the ASEAN as it was then. And perhaps I'll be guided by you as to exactly what else you want to know.
Yes, you want to know many more things. So first, so as I said, maybe it is something which was started, it took a long time to take off, but then it is it's a combination of multitudes of nations, histories, cultures, traditions, religions, and practices. So I can imagine that there would have been many differences among the member states in their points of view and in their outlooks. And so, what was the kind of connecting thread among these diverse nations that made it successful to go along to, as you said, that you plodded along and then you forged a common path forward for ASEAN? So, what is that? What is it that made it go along successfully? And what is the key to the success? Because I'm asking this because in one of the private conversations that we had, you said that, we decided to leave aside the differences and focus on the commonalities. Of course, that's exactly the idea. But then, if I see many of the multilateral organizations now, they all say this, right? We leave aside the differences and we go along with the common interests. So, what is actually the what was the framework, or what in the framework actually made it work successfully for so long, that you have an
Yeah.
endured success? And I was saying in the introduction, it could be because there were certain principles, as you said, that were agreed upon. Those principles, I would like you, while you are explaining us, telling us the key to the secret of ASEAN, the secret key to the success of ASEAN, sorry. So I would also like you to relate it to the principles that on which it is formed, and on which it is it's founded, and how those principles relate to Dharma and Dharmic traditions and Dharmic cultures.
All right. That's an interesting question. And I like to go back, say about right back to the 7th century, if you will just give me a little bit of time. For nearly 7 centuries, from the 7th century up to the 14th century, our region, Southeast Asia, was really under the influence of India. The Chola dynasty, sorry, it started with the Srivijaya dynasty, the Chola dynasty, and the Majapahit dynasty. And we used to even have traders coming in from Venice, from China. So at that time itself, Southeast Asia was attracting the attention of traders, merchants. It was the maritime Silk Road. They were coming for spices, and then moving on from there um, to China, to Japan. There there was a very close. The whole area, you might say, was like a global trading hub where merchants, traders, um, and empires came and settled down, and it was mostly Indian empires, and who not only brought with them the trade angle, but they also brought with them they introduced Buddhism and Hinduism in the end. The Majapahit, the empire, uh, they brought in uh, the during the time of the Majapahits, I think it was less emphasis was placed on Buddhism and more on Hinduism because of the Tamil connection. So whatever their intentions were, at least as far as Southeast Asia was concerned, they their main idea was to control the Straits of Malacca, because that was the waterway, important waterway for trade. And whoever had fortified or strengthened their hold in Sumatra or in Malaysia or Indonesia would be able to control the trade through this important waterway. In the end, you'll find that, not in the end, but towards the 14th century, that is just before the arrival of the Western colonialism, they had already established a number of principalities and kingdoms all over the region. And there were Buddhist organizations all the way, and principalities and kingdoms uh, from uh, from Java to Malaysia to Thailand, uh, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, southern Vietnam in particular, and even it touched southern Philippines. So you can see that the world, at least the attention of other powers in Asia, on Southeast Asia, not in Asia, but on this particular area that we are occupying now, it was a geostrategic area for them. And it was therefore the advantage for Southeast Asia was there were no wars at that time. I mean, the wars were between themselves, you know. The Chola Empire, they had their own problems, and they were fighting amongst themselves. The Majapahits, the same. The Sri Vijaya, they were empires, but within them, at different periods of time, different kings and princes and others came and went, um, and some stayed short while, some stayed for longer, and they also expanded at the same time. So that influence was very strong, the Dharma influence, and in that 7 centuries before the coming of the Westerners, uh, Buddhism and Hinduism had taken root in the region. And towards the end of the 13th century, I think, Islam also came in with the Arab traders. Um, and Asia, the Islam began to replace Hinduism or Buddhism. Um, but although the outward vestiges of Buddhism and Hinduism were removed, they had still the fact remained that a lot of these principalities, especially under the Majapahit empire, they not only had brought in the priests, the teachers, the architects, and given a kind of a structure to the principalities that they were in. So when the Westerners came, and the first Westerners to come to our part of the world were the Portuguese in 1511 under Alfonso de Albuquerque. He came, and of course they had superior firepower and all that, and they were able to defeat the locals, the local sultan, and established their foothold in Malacca. And they stayed on until 1641 when the Dutch arrived. But the uh, the Dutch had also a foothold in Indonesia, um, while the French were already eyeing Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So the spheres of influence of the foreign powers was already shaping up with France in the north, in these countries of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, and then the British in Malaysia, Singapore, Borneo, and the Dutch in in Indonesia. Philippines was moved closer then to the U.S. because the U.S. Were trying to establish a foothold there. after Magellan, uh, after Magellan came, so, I'm sorry, the first to arrive was Albuquerque, and Magellan, who had, instead of going around the Cape of Good Hope, he went around the Cape of uh, what what is the straits called in South America? Cape of Magellan, isn't it? Yeah, the Cape of Magellan. So that he rounded that cape, and then he landed in the Philippines, and so the Philippine association, or rather the association with the Philippines, had more effect than the others, than the Majapahit or Majapahit influence. Although there are there is evidence that Buddhism and Hinduism did have an impact on certain areas in the Philippines. So when we were doing trade, as well as at the same time, with the trade came the elements of religion and this Buddhism and strains of Buddhism and Hinduism. And you could see that it was a kind of a dharma already working. And it was working in a very peaceful way. That was the time when Borobudur was set up, or rather put up, Angkor Wat. These are all good examples. And we had the Bujang Valley, where we have found remnants of the old Indian Empire relics. All evidences that there's these instances, or rather, the presence of the old Indian empires was still there. But that also taught us, with whatever the as you know, Hinduism and Buddhism, they don't teach you violence, and some of those the emphasis that they placed on prayer, on and treating each other civilly, and and having that feeling of being in a family, resolving our issues in a family rather than fighting. These were all part of the, the what you might call at that time the Dharma values, which we still have here today. And so that is the background that I wanted to say, that we had a link with Dharma in the old days itself, and then it was further fortified when the Muslims took over, and also with China coming in at that time. Chinese, you remember Admiral Cheng Ho, the famous eunuch. He used to come to Malacca, and the Malacca princes and royalty used to exchange gifts with their Chinese counterparts. They even used to send their daughters to be married in China, and the Chinese also used to do the same. So and the even today, if you go to Malacca, there is a Portuguese colony there, and these families they speak the old Portuguese, and all living side by side without any without any problems. So I want to I'm saying all this because what we inherited from our ancestors was this idea that we have to work together, that there should, war is not war is not something that we would consider to resolve our issues and our problems.
Yeah, I think that gives me a perfect transition to the other idea. The next idea that I had was, yes, I am sure that of course it is a successful story, and it's a kind of, in spite of the differences and the multitudes of cultures and traditions, the diversity of cultures. But I am sure there might have been periods of tensions within this, in this period. It's not, may not have always been a smooth sailing boat. So, and the tools for conflict resolutions, among the tools, of course, among the dharmic cultures we speak of, and it's very important that you highlighted the influence of dharma cultures even before the Western powers came in. And it is amazing to see that even after they left, these dharmic attitudes and outlooks have remained are being applied even in the negotiations and discussions within ASEAN. So if you look at dharma and dharmic ways of resolving conflicts, we talk about different conflict resolution tools, such as sama, dana, beda, dhanda, they say. And starting with sama is dialogue. We can take it as dialogue. So the first tool that we use to resolve tensions is dialogue, and dialogue has to be a continuous process, not just once. And sending even in the olden days, and in our ancient stories in history, we have people sending emissaries to each other and trying to come to a resolution of any tension. So what are of course, as I said, there would have been tension. So can you give us some examples of course you did before the ASEAN was created, the tension between Malaysia and Indonesia, but then during the life or during the trajectory of ASEAN, have there been any tensions that you might call some major tensions, and how were they resolved? The reason I'm asking is that, of course, tensions continue to exist in the world, and we are actually in current times going through many tensions in different parts of the world. So what would be the lesson to be learned from how ASEAN solved its tensions among the member states?
So, first of all, coming now in particular to the ASEAN way of doing things, one of the earliest things that, one of the earliest what I was trying to say there, the idea of consensus, arriving at a consensus, was very important to ASEAN. So that has become one of the pillars of the ASEAN way. And this has been, we have received criticism because of that. As they say, consensus means you can only proceed as fast as the slowest member. Any one member can block you from proceeding, going ahead with that plan or project. But we felt that it is important to carry everybody together, and if they were not ready, then we will wait. Now, that was in the early days, all right? There's an evolution to that. When we started the ASEAN Free Trade Area, and that was one of the first concrete projects.
Sorry, when was that? What year was the free trade started?
It started in 1993. And that was my KPI. I was asked to do that. The day I sat on my chair, first day as Secretary General of ASEAN, I had to start implementing the ASEAN Free Trade Area. The decision to structure the Secretariat, the Singapore Summit agreed that yes, we will have now a Secretary General of ASEAN, not of the ASEAN Secretariat. He shall have minister status, and he should be there for 5 years. And then we have also agreed to establish the ASEAN Free Trade Area, and we will get the ASEAN Secretariat to implement this. They
Sorry,
didn't.
I sidetracked you, but you were talking about the consensus. How to do the ASEAN way of building
Yeah,
consensus?
yeah. As I said, at, earlier we had said that we will proceed on the basis of consensus. Now, when you are sitting together to increase trade, and I know that many of you have had some trade background on that, if you have a dispute in trade, are you going to, if someone is objecting to lowering his tariffs and all that, are you going to then wait and give and try and delay? You may not be deliberately delaying it, but just because you don't agree or you can't implement the project, then the others are slowed down. To overcome that, we started this principle of the 10 minus X principle. The 10 minus X principle means if out of the 10, 9 countries or 8 countries have agreed and 2 have not agreed, they will proceed. And the 2 can come in and join in at any time after that. Now that's a modification of that consensus rule, you know, and it has worked. And also, you see, they were very cautious about establishing the free trade area. They said within 15 years. And we at the Secretariat, we really worked very hard. You know, I'm not an economist and I knew nothing about a free trade area. I didn't know the difference between tariff nomenclature and non-tariff barriers. And, you know, we had to learn this as we went along. And the Secretariat staff also, I had to drive them to sometimes to get things moving. And we were very happy that within 5 years before I left, the that 15 years of the 15-year cap for the lowering of the tariffs was brought down to 5 years. I think it was 5 years. Was it 5 years? And 15 years, sorry, initially it was 15 years. And as a result of our work at the Secretariat, with the cooperation of the economic officials and the ministries, and of course the ministers also were all geared up. We were, in 5 years, we were able to lower the tariff rates, which we were supposed to have done in 15 years, in 5 years. So that was one of the great achievements that we did. And now I think the ASEAN Free Trade Area, they're not only talking about free trade area, now also investment area, where you are given, ASEAN countries will be given priority and special preferences, or I think the ASEAN, they call it the ASEAN investment area. And so economically, I think the countries are doing very well. Even even when I took over as Secretary General of ASEAN, that was the 80s, 80s to the 90s. ASEAN was already developing at double-digit growth rates, and not only that, the World Bank was describing our growth as the East Asian miracle.
Yes, and they were called the East Asian Tigers.
Tigers, that's right. And lots of attention was being given to ASEAN. Other countries, other regional organizations wanted to join ASEAN, and we said you cannot join ASEAN because ASEAN is only for the region, Southeast Asia. But we had other forms of engagement with those countries who wanted to also come in and help us. And these were the we, we, we established the sectoral dialogue partnership rather than the dialogue partner. So they had sectoral dialogue partners, and they came and started having meetings with ASEAN. And over a period of time, then they were all promoted to full dialogue partners. So the difference between the dialogue partner and the sectoral partner was that the sectoral partner could be invited to the ASEAN meetings, but they could not make any statement. They're just there as observers. So, whereas if you're a dialogue partner, then you have dialogue with the countries, with ASEAN countries on various issues. Um, so India was, for instance, a sectoral dialogue partner first. Uh, Korea was a sectoral dialogue partner. The EU was a dialogue partner, full dialogue partner, because we had a lot of things to discuss with them. And they had full dialogue status.
And now that you talk about the EU, so is there one day an intention of going further than the economic free trade partnership to go to a political union like the EU, or?
They have not. I think we have always in ASEAN looked upon the EU as our model, but that doesn't mean that didn't mean that we have to uh, take up that their model, lock, stock, and barrel as something good for us. We have also learned the lessons of Brexit and the having a common currency. Well, we are watching very closely what is happening in other regional areas, and we do what we think is possible within our own limits, and which is good for us.
Yeah, I really like in the previous on the previous point what you said about when there is tension we go for some consensus, and for the member states that don't agree we wait till they are ready to come to an agreement with us, because that's, and you made the comparison with the family. I think it's a very interesting comparison that one of the children doesn't agree with the others, we're not going to kick them out of the family, we keep them in the family and try to get around to having them in the within the common agreement. So I think that's one of the, if I may kind of highlight that as one of the ways, the unique ASEAN way, which has made it successful over such a long time, such a long period of time. It could be one of the unique features of the ASEAN way that we can point to. So then you said that there are, and I think we heard also in the speech by Her Excellency that there is a possibility of adding new members, and Timor-Leste is apparently, and it is under discussion. So that is another thing that maybe I was thinking of, that if I were, of course, you'll say anybody out of the region is disqualified. That is well understood. But if I were another country part of that region, why would I be interested in joining ASEAN? So there is a free trade attraction. Of course, free trade is an important aspect of becoming part of that group. And in fact, maybe I was thinking of another sub question. In the free trade, because most of the countries, if you look at most of the economies in the ASEAN group, they are very similar economies, maybe some outliers like Indonesia, maybe in terms of size, population, it's an outlier, and Singapore in terms of economic well-being may be an outlier. But in general, most of the member states are kind of similar in nature and size and economic power, and also similar in terms of competencies or comparative advantage over the rest of the world. So probably a lot of these countries are producing similar things. So how was it made sure that they don't compete with each other on the international market, rather compete as a group or work as a group. That was one of my questions. If you want to address, I mean, you're free. And as I said, you can go in other directions too. But now the other question that now I
No, no.
thought about is
Let me
answer that. Okay,
answer that
please. Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Uh, no, I think that's an important question, and one needs to understand this very well. You said that the sorry, once again, what
Yeah,
was
yeah. I
the?
said the economies probably were also the comparative
Oh yeah,
advantage lied in
okay,
the same fields or the
yeah,
same sectors, and
sure.
how did they manage to not compete with each other, but in international market, but compete as a group or
Yeah,
work as a
I used to have this comment made to me very often that Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, you're all producing the same products, commodities, rubber, tin, um, fruits, vegetables, whatever, and you are competing for the same markets. How can you make a ASEAN free trade area work while you are competing with each other? But that's the beauty of it. The competition hasn't stopped. We still have the same markets, and these markets are, in fact, instead of growing and narrowing, they are growing. And ASEAN's biggest partner now is, I think, the United States has taken over this year over China, but it was China for a while now, and the United States, China, Japan, the EU, Singapore, they are our big partners today, and they are just not. This is not just for commodities, but we are going into industrialization and manufacturing. Even now, chip manufacturing for Malaysia is a big name there. So you can see that the areas of cooperation have widened. And within ASEAN also now, we are also exchanging expertise so that we are trying to make it easier for let's say a Singapore lawyer to come and work in Malaysia or Indonesia, or an Indonesian corporate leader to come and work in Malaysia. And if they have a project, they can bring in their team with them. This is just to facilitate the easier manner of working, and to promote industrialization and investments in the area.
So then sorry.
We are very happy with competing with one another.
Good.
We are not afraid of competition.
Good. I think that's the way forward. Now, the other question that I wanted to ask you was, if a new member now wants to join, of course they get the benefits of the free trade and the economic benefits, if you want to, if you say. But is there any other, like, because they are part of ASEAN, is it easier for them to voice their concerns in the international forum than as an individual state? So is ASEAN a good forum to voice common concerns, or an individual state's concern, economic, political, whatever, on the international arena?
Sure. I mean, that's also another very interesting question, because um, right from the beginning, this was already evident. We used to attend UN meetings, and we may be taking different positions. Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei may have one stand as far as uh, the Palestine issue or the Middle East issue is concerned. Um, Other member states will have, take a different stand. So the diversity of opinion was there, but we respect each other's views. And just because you are in ASEAN, that it doesn't mean that we must all have the same views. We will differ according to our national interests, and it'll be understood. But the important thing is, there is always uh, discussion and cooperation held on what each country will be doing, what stand is taking on that particular issue at the UN or at any other fora where where it would be necessary. And for that matter, for that purpose, we have established ASEAN committees. There is an ASEAN committee of the permanent reps in New York. There's an ASEAN committee in Geneva of all the ambassadors. They meet together, they discuss whatever issues they have here locally, and then they will report to their various uh, ministries back home that the Malaysians have this view, Singapore has this view, and we had a discussion. We don't know. We are we think that there is a possibility of everybody voting on together on this particular issue, and they would advise our governments. So we have these ASEAN committees in each of the capitals wherever our embassies are, and there is very close and warm family relations that go on between us, and
Excellent.
it further strengthens the web of ties that we have within ASEAN. Not only do we have the meetings in Jakarta, but also in our in various capitals abroad where we have our embassies. The first people that you will meet or you will like to meet when I'm posted in Geneva, the first thing I would do is I'll think of meeting my ASEAN colleagues and paying my respects to them, protocol wise. So this is that special feature also that we have in ASEAN, and then it's all part of what we have inherited.
ASEAN spirit, yeah, I
Yeah.
think is. So maybe I think we are nearing the ending time, and I would like to also leave some time for the questions from the floor. But maybe final question or one of the final questions is, we said that we want to relate in the final question. I want to relate it to the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's one of the kind of link we want to make between dharmic perspectives, dharmic views, and Sustainable Development Goals. And among the 17 goals, the last one is global partnerships for sustainable development. So if you look at if you look at it from that angle, so what would be the ASEAN message to say? Of course, that is a regional grouping. There are special features. There's a context to it, and there's a history to it. But not only for the global partnership, but for other regional groupings. So what would be the ASEAN message to other groupings that already exist or that are being made? You see, currently, I think there are a lot more of these multilateral groupings that are being formed, political, economic, and other types. So, what would be the ASEAN message to other regional groupings, or as well as to the global partnership, global world?
I think the discussions on the special development goals is ongoing, and they have had numerous meetings, and at all these meetings, our ASEAN delegations take a very active role. I don't think any country in ASEAN would want to move away from the commitments that we have already given. And the fact that we are taking interest in all that, even at home now, you can see when I'm talking about home, say in Malaysia and in other countries, uh, we, you travel to other ASEAN capitals. At the hotels, they'll talk about preserving the environment and being careful about energy. They're all very conscious of this, and I don't think that you will find ASEAN dragging its feet on any issue as far as the special development goes.
Yeah. On the other hand, I think what would be a recommendation from ASEAN to make these, because if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals now, there were a certain number of targets to be reached by 2030. If you look at most of the targets, you're well behind. The world is well behind reaching those targets. Whereas probably if you had gone another way, the ASEAN way, would it have been would it have been kind of would we be closer to the targets, or what is will be the ASEAN, what would be the lesson to be learned from the ASEAN model for the global partnership?
Well, I mean, I think if we had to reach a goal, and if the members of ASEAN are not able, if one particular member or members are not able to meet those goals, then either we will discuss it amongst ourselves and see how we can help them. Whatever they need, they only have to ask for, we will discuss it amongst ourselves. But this is basically a matter, a bilateral issue. It depends on that country itself whether they are firmly committed to the sustainable goals, which to which they have already a signatory, isn't it? So no, I find it a little difficult to answer that question in a very direct way as you would like. But one thing I'm sure, although I'm not deep into this sustainable development as I am in ASEAN has been part of me. Sustainable development goals came after a long time. And I'm not really following that very keenly. But speaking from experience, I think every country in ASEAN is taking it very seriously.
Yes, of course, yeah. And also, I think one of what you said in one of the conversations we've had, you said that a budget is equally shared among all the member countries. So maybe those things like that are points to think about for global groupings for the world to go forward.
Yeah. This is a point that maybe I should have emphasized too. That when you're talking about the ASEAN way, we also decided that everybody will share equally in the budget, whether you're Laos and Cambodia or Singapore or Brunei, we all will share equally, and everybody has one vote. Although they never vote, but on paper at least you have one vote.
Yes. Excellent. I think I will finish the official part of the conversation. And before I leave the floor to the audience, I just want to say it has been a very stimulating conversation, at least for me. And I've learned a lot of, not only about ASEAN, but history, everything. So very, very, very informative discussion and conversation. So I think now we can open the floor for some questions from the audience. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
Just first of all, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Tan Sri for sharing with us your insight on ASEAN, and I would like to thank Dharma Alliance for organizing this talk. I just want to respond to your last question and further to what Tan Sri mentioned. The linkage between sustainable development and ASEAN community back in 2015 when the Agenda 2030 was adopted. It was the same in that same year that the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 was also adopted. So if you look at these two key documents, important documents, there are some similarity and complementarity. That's why ASEAN back then we work with the UNSCAP and UNDP to try to find common elements and come up with what we call the complementarity initiatives to identify key elements in both documents that ASEAN can work together while implementing the ASEAN Community Vision. We also paving the way to attain the SDG. There are 5 elements if I'm not wrong, there are 5 elements that which have been identified as priority areas. First one is poverty eradication. The second one is on infrastructure and connectivity, sustainable consumption and production, and sustainable management of the environment. The last one was resilience. So all these are the 5 priority areas that we identify as in the complementarity initiative. So when ASEAN works, we also take into account how to attain both the community vision and the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you for this complimentary information. And I think it's important to, I mean, I don't have at the back of the mind how the different nations have achieved the targets, but I am sure if you look at the different nations of the world and their where they are in terms of achieving the SDGs, I'm sure the Southeast Asian countries are leading the rest of the world. I can almost say that, without looking at the figures. So yes, thank you very much for that. Any other question, remark?
Tan Sri and Prof. Jaya, my name is Haris. I'm a student from University of Geneva. It's been a great pleasure to hear from Tan Sri just now, especially about the historical background on the foundation of ASEAN, as well as the way forward on how we, going through with centrality and consensus approach. My question would be, currently amidst of the global tension that we have right now, and how do you see ASEAN way of dealing with the external pressures that we have right now, and at the same time, we want to foster a good cooperation with those member countries, because all member states of ASEAN, we have a difference in terms of our interests, even in the bilateral aspects, and how we go on by having one unity voice on it. And perhaps Tan Sri can also relate with your experience before as Secretary General of ASEAN back in 1993. Thank you. Stance on those issues, but we have to come up with a united stance.
Hello. Consensus on difficult issues like the Middle East would be difficult to arrive, because here we have to look at issues from the national interest point of view of the particular country. I can imagine that Singapore may have a different view from Malaysia, for instance, on the Middle East, and to see whether we could come on to have a common position, that would be, I would consider as unlikely. But the ASEAN way is that we have agreed that if we disagree, we will disagree agreeably. All right, so that we can still be friends at the end of the day, because we understand, you understand our national interests, and I understand your national interests in this, and I you are in best position to decide for yourself what you think is good for your country. So this is what the situation will be on that. But I think what you really wanted to ask me was about Myanmar. Myanmar, to me, is a more issue that involves all of us, in ASEAN. Um, to take you back a little bit, do we have time? To take you back a little, back in time a little. During the time when we were admitting um, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, Vietnam had already joined in '95, and Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam was supposed to join in '97. The ASEAN Secretariat was given the task of preparing these countries to join ASEAN. Okay, now what does that mean? That means that in the Secretariat, one of the criteria for joining ASEAN was you must accede to all the ASEAN agreements, declarations that have been issued by our leaders and ministers. Number two, you must implement the ASEAN Free Trade Area. And number three, you have to support the ASEAN Secretariat's budget with the other members on an equal basis. And number four, English is the official language of ASEAN. And I think number six is that you must have an embassy in all the ASEAN countries. Now that's the criteria, and it is on this basis that I have been given this mandate now to prepare the others for ready to join ASEAN. Now, the very first task I had was English was not their common language. And we had to translate all the ASEAN documents into the Vietnamese language, into the French language, into the Cambodian language, into Lao language, so they could understand what it is, what kind of responsibilities they are going to bear. And that itself, you can imagine, how much the task is going to take. Where are you going to find the resources? If I asked the foreign ministers for money, they said, no, we got no money to give you. So what do? I have to go use my own contacts with other foundations and sources. And then secondly, communication. We were just on the point of computerization, the secretariat and the national secretariats. And these people, they didn't even have enough money to buy computers, and they also had to be trained to use the computers. Then thirdly, I suggested that we bring in officers from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Laos to the secretariat on attachment, so that they could be with us and learn how we are doing business in ASEAN, how we resolve issues, what we do, and that it is all done in an open, transparent way. There is nothing to hide. Make them feel that they're coming into a family that they know. So when I went to Myanmar, there was no problem of English because they had, English rule. And you can imagine, even on the legal aspect, we had different legal systems. Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore follow the British legal system. Indonesia had the Dutch system. Cambodia, Laos, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. They would do the French way. They're doing the French way. So how do you come to an agreement on an issue which might involve an aspect of law? So this is why I said you have to put the larger interest of ASEAN sometimes, and think of ASEAN in a bigger perspective. On the question of Myanmar again, English no problem. Myanmar was a member of the WTO even before we were all independent, you know, and they had no problem with embassies because, look, they even had a Secretary General of ASEAN, for heaven's sake. You can't? Of the UN, what did I say? Yeah, they had a Secretary General of the UN long before any of us had. You can't. So you're talking about a country which has had a lot of experience already. And then you are pressuring ASEAN not to invite them. They are part of our region. When ASEAN was established in 1967, the foreign ministers of Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and Thailand invited Myanmar to join them to join in with ASEAN to become a member. Myanmar did not agree. They said, no, sorry, we are non-aligned. We consider ASEAN as a Western anti-communist organization. So they kept away. But they were strong members of the non-aligned group. So we left Myanmar out at their request. And it was 97 now. We are already reaching the point where Laos had announced its intention that they would become members in 1997 after Vietnam became member in 1995. They announced it openly. 2 years they wanted extra for the preparations. So within the 2 years, we also had to get Myanmar ready. But Myanmar had no problems. All their rules and regulations on trade and taxation and all that, very similar to Malaysia, because they were following the British system. And but there was intense pressure from outside on the capitals. I felt that pressure too, but not to the same extent as the countries, the capitals, because the decisions eventually will have to be made at the capital, not by me. And ASEAN held its ground. Myanmar, Laos, and Myanmar and Laos joined ASEAN in 1997, my last year in office. And now the situation is they have this problem, the Rohingya issue, which has affected many countries in ASEAN. And it has also become a local domestic issue as well for some of the countries. And there are also pressures, internal pressures on each of these countries to send these Rohingyas back. Myanmar now is under the rule of this military junta. that has gone back on what it had, on the assurance, or rather the agreement it had reached with ASEAN on the 5 principles. And this is the first time that a member country in ASEAN has gone against the agreement that it was a part of when the 5 principles were drawn up. They've gone back on the agreement. So now the pressure is on us. Why don't you kick them out? No, that's not the ASEAN way. We have those that 5 principles. We are still working on them. And if you see that statement of ASEAN on Myanmar, it's one of the strongest that I've ever seen. Condemn that regime. Never used that word before. So, if it demands, ASEAN will act. But at the same time, always bearing in mind that we are still ASEAN and we do things our own way. Even in our family, if one of the members is, as you said, is recalcitrant and he gets scolding and all that, you don't want to kick him out of the house. Maybe 1 or 2 days or 3 days. In this instance, it may even take longer. You slowly come back. We don't want to have this situation where, okay, there is an issue, therefore the easiest way is get them out. No. That's not the ASEAN way. Does that answer your question?
Any other questions from the audience today? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much to the both of you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much to the both of you. I want to give you just to say thank you very much for the long trip over here, the various meetings, and of course sharing time with not just myself but our whole team that we've been getting closer to each other, getting to know who you are, what your career has been all about, and presenting a new view of ASEAN over here in this little corner of Europe. So I just want to say thank you, and definitely will not be the last time. Definitely not. Jayaji, as always, great. Thank you very much for your time. And as you said, very insightful today. Very, very insightful. I definitely learned something new today. And I think the audience hopefully agrees too that it was a informative session today. Regarding future events, as of tonight, I cannot announce anything for next week. But soon enough, we will have something coming up. So just be aware, pay attention to messages that we'll send out. And in the meantime, thank you and have a great evening. And if anyone has not signed the sign-in sheet, please take a moment to sign in the sign-in sheet so we can update you accordingly. Otherwise, that's it, and good night. And the tea, of course, and the tea and biscuits. Thank you all. Good night.